last diagram there, the Vipassana diagram in the top right-hand corner. So we'll leave that for tomorrow evening. The other thing, again, to remember is that the monkey in the tree there we looked at earlier, number 19. So again, particularly once we get to these middling stages and the mind really starts to calm down, be more clear, more focused, you'll find that because you're creating that clear space, a lot of great ideas will pop up in your meditation. And as we saw from number 19, that's not the right time then to entertain those ideas. If a great idea pops up, simply go, okay, great idea, I'll attend to that after the meditation. And if you're worried about forgetting that, you can jot down a few key words on a little pad next to you and go back to the practice. Any questions about the first few stages?
Something very small. The meditator,
yeah.
At his left hand, it's the number 2 and number 3. It's look like the rope and the hook. So what he has?
No, hook is number 4.
So what is number?
Number 2 is the stage 1. If you go over the page, number 2 it says stage 1, directed attention. So number 2 is just. Number 2 means stage, is just describing that stage. And number 3 is the rope of mindfulness.
What is the house in between?
I don't think I've ever seen any description in here about that, but maybe it might mean that I'm just speculating here, maybe that we're sort of moving out of our normal routine and into the Shamatha practice or something. I'm not sure what the house is symbolising. Power of thinking, number 1. So that's that first road. So it means that if we want to get into the practice, the power of thinking, the power of hearing is number 1. The power of thinking is that we are reflecting on this practice. We're contemplating the practice in terms of the instructions and the benefits, and that can help us to get further into the practice. And that's how we can get to stage 2, by thinking about the practice more, reflecting on it, how to do it, and the benefits and so forth.
A question about what you said about meditating at home. You said quality over quantity.
Quality over quantity, yeah.
Sometimes it takes me like 15 minutes only to start.
Takes you, sorry, what?
Like 15 minutes.
To start?
To start relaxing the mind enough to
Sure.
start focusing.
Sure.
So, what would you do about that?
Well, of course, the question is she said that it takes like maybe 15 minutes to sort of prepare for the practice.
Sometimes if I'm agitated and I'm...
If it takes 15 minutes to prepare, it takes 15 minutes to prepare. I mean, you can't rush preparation. So, of course, and we're going to look at this maybe tomorrow or the next day, I think. There are things we can do around us in our life to help support this practice, so that actually when we get into the practice, we couldn't prepare a little bit more quickly. But I mean, if it takes 15 minutes to prepare, it takes 15 minutes to prepare. It's okay. And then then again, how long to meditate once you're prepared is quality over quantity. So, depending on then, once you're prepared, how long you can sustain that attention in a sort of reasonable way. Whatever that time is for you as an individual. One other thing I wanted to mention that reminded me is, what does it mean to be at a particular stage? Like, for example, stage 3 is that we can hold the object maybe 5 or 10 minutes. If we get distracted, we quickly come back. Maybe now, in one particular session, we have that experience. But that doesn't mean we're at stage 3. To be at stage 3, or any stage, it means if that is our normal average experience, if your average experience is that normally you hold the object 5 or 10 minutes, and if you get distracted, you quickly come back. If that's your normal experience in this practice, then you're at stage 3. That's what it means. In any given session, you could be dropping down a couple of stages if your mind is very agitated, or you could be going up a few stages if your mind is very calm. So within that, there can be variation from individual sessions, but that's what it means to be at a particular stage. Yeah.
If we're doing like 2 meditation sessions a day,
2 meditation sessions a day, yeah.
Yeah, would you recommend doing it with the same object, or doing different, like with breath and mind?
Okay, so the question is, if we're doing 2 meditation sessions a day, should we use the same object or different objects? One thing that I'm going to talk about later is, and I've mentioned a few times it really actually already, is that we need to have like an integrated approach, a balanced approach. So therefore, to exclusively just do shamatha practice is a little bit imbalanced. So we need some balance with the loving kindness and compassion wing. A bit of vipassana also would be helpful. So we need to sort of have all the food groups balanced. Otherwise it's unhealthy. So how much to balance, of course, will depend on us as an individual and what's really going on at any particular time and where we're at in our practice. So there's a lot of variables, but we need a sort of a balanced approach to practice. So I would suggest that if we're doing 2 meditation sessions a day, say maybe 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, perhaps, then probably the shamatha practice is maybe better in the morning, because that's when we're most calm and alert, usually for most people. And then maybe in the evening we can do maybe a bit more shamatha, or then we can do loving kindness, compassion, vipassana, so forth. Something like that. But, we can, as long as we have a balanced approach, that's fine. And then in terms of the objects, if we want to do some shamatha in the evening and morning, then, yeah, maybe, if we have our standard, whatever we're using object, do that in the morning. And then in the evening we can maybe use one of the others because each one has their own benefits, So let's say we're using the breath as our normal object in the morning, good. Maybe in the evening we're observing the mind or resting in awareness. And that might be also helpful for sort of processing all the things that happen during the day, for example, So that's okay. Okay, let's leave it there. We'll go to the... actually, before we do the Shavasana, I want to talk a little bit more about tomorrow, so maybe it's better to do that before the meditation. So tomorrow, in fact, for the next 2 days, the shamatha part of the day, you get to choose whichever object you want to work with. To give you an option to maybe go a bit deeper in the practice or learn the practice a bit better or so forth. So there's a few options here that you could do. One, of course, is that if there's one of these particular objects that we've used, one of the breath variations, the mind, resting in awareness, if there's one of those that you are strongly drawn to and you really want to practice that more, then maybe you can use that in every session for the next 2 days to go a little bit more into that practice. That's one option. Another option might be that you're not really strongly drawn to any particularly one of them, so you might think, okay, I'll use the next 2 days to methodically go through those various practices just to know each one a little bit better. So that's another possibility. Or you could, like a little bit like we've done here, is like maybe tomorrow, the first day, you could do the resting in awareness, say, and then the following day follow that up with then observing the movements of the mind. So that would go together well. So you've got a couple of different possibilities there. What I wouldn't recommend is every session doing something different. I think that wouldn't be so helpful. Does anyone have any doubts or questions about that, about object?
You actually asked before watching the movement of the mind,
right,
with the awareness, or just watching the mind, it's the same.
It's the same, yeah. But that's right. But by consciously resting in awareness, that can often help avoid getting caught up in the thoughts. But it's the same practice.
So it's better to rest in awareness and watching the movement of them? It's like more stable or something?
Try it out. See what your experience is.
When I'm trying to stay in awareness, I find myself going through just breathing and then the nostrils to get more clearly, and then going all the way to stay in
In awareness? Yeah, sure.
Do you think in like a period of 20 minutes it's too much changing method, or?
So, so the question is, if we're resting in awareness and then we sort of go to the nostrils to make that more clear, is that sort of okay to do like that? So, as I've introduced a few times, I think, in various situations in the last couple of days, is that if what the practice you're doing, for example, observing the mind or resting in awareness, if you're distracted or you're blank or something, then you can go back and anchor yourself, for example, in the breath. So I think this is fine to do that, to have that as an anchor point for that practice. So that's fine. But at some point then slowly, once you get more and more clear, then you'll just rest in awareness. You don't need to go anchor in the breath. So again, it's a sort of short-term remedy to help to get more into the practice. So, but that's fine.
A little bit like the person with the allergies.
Sure.
I have one thing, like a sensation that is distracting me. So after his question, I was planning on just meditating on that, but I don't want to do it for 2 days.
No.
So what would like?
So yeah. So at first, I want to address something else that your question reminded me of, is that, and I'll emphasize this again tomorrow because it's important, is that to relax, and I think a few of you commented today about the relaxing. So again, in these 2 days is not to have this, I need to, push and to get some sort of experience in the next couple of days. Just very relaxed and be completely relaxed and don't have this pushing mind. And on top of that, if you do notice that there's tension building up, we need to just, on the out-breath, just keep releasing that. And particularly, I think the nostrils practice and observing the mind can be practices that we easily get tense in. And so particularly if we notice a lot of sensations across the forehead, around the eyes, if we notice a lot of sensations there, doing the breath practice or even observing the mind, and we can't release the tension, then don't stay at the nostrils, go down to the abdomen or full body or the rhythm of the breath, bring your attention down and relax, 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 relax. Similarly, if you're observing the mind and you notice a lot of tension around in the face area, don't keep observing the mind. Probably best again to go back into the body, into the rhythm of the breath or something. Relax, 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 relax. Once you're much more calm, then you can go back to that object. So that's important. And then specifically, you're talking about certain sensations in the body, to use that as the object. Again, maybe the advice from a bit earlier is use your normal object, whatever that's going to be. And if these sensations are really, and of course if it's due to tension, then of course relax, relax, relax. But if it's not, and if they're drawing you away constantly, then temporarily you can just simply focus on them, like the sound or the hay fever or the tightness in the chest or some quite strong sound outside, that rather than fight with that, then you can temporarily just for the rest of that session or for however long it's there, just focus on that as the object. Because otherwise, if it's a strong repetitive sound outside or some strong sensation in the body, it's just going to pull your attention. So if you can't release it, then for the rest of that session or for whatever long it's there, then just observe that, shift that to that as your object. And again, with relaxation, of course.
Would you say the same about like strong emotions?
Well, because in which practice? Observing the mind or?
Yeah, that's it. Or
Well, if you're observing the mind, then strong emotion's good because it's part of the object.
Yeah, that's true. But okay, so if I'm focusing on the breath, like, and there is a strong emotion coming up, would you focus on the emotion, not on the story, of course, but on the emotion?
Yeah, again, if of course, first line approach is not focus on the emotion. The first line approach, let it go, come back to breath, let it keep doing that. But then again, if it's persistent, then and it's just pulling you away, then yeah, you can temporarily focus on it. Just observe it. Just observe it. It's okay. But again, we shouldn't use this as a first line approach because then it's just distraction.
So this,
Is there a reason we do not practice a scan of the body? Why we do not practice it? What is the reason?
The question is, why don't we practice scanning the body? You mean like so far? Or in general?
In this retreat,
So why don't we scan the body in this retreat? Scanning the body is a Vipassana practice, and we're mainly doing Shamatha. We're going to be looking at the Vipassana practice a little bit on day after tomorrow and then on day 9. And so we'll do some Vipassana practices there, various Vipassana practices. I can't remember, but I think scanning the body is maybe not one of those that we're going to do, but it is, of course, a valid Vipassana practice, particularly for impermanence, particularly in the Theravada tradition, that they do that. So it is a Vipassana practice, and the reason we're not doing it here is because we're doing Shamatha practice.
So you say it doesn't show weight, but here it is not developing the clarity or...
Anything we do with focus improves mindfulness, of course. So scanning the body, focusing on a task, anything we do with mindfulness is good, but for developing single-pointed concentration, we need to have like a static object. So scanning the body is probably not so effective for shamatha practice.
Because it's not static.
Because you're moving everywhere.
And also the sensations are changing, right?
Yeah.
Even if I take one place.
Yeah, so that's why if you're focusing on the body, is pick one spot, like the nostrils, the abdomen, so forth.
Not the sensation inside, just the movement.
Well, because here we're consciously scanning through everywhere, so there's a lot of movement there in terms. So more effective would be focus, if you want to focus on the body, focus nostrils, abdomen and so forth for shamatha. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit more, of course, during the sessions tomorrow. I'll give you some more tips about the practices. But again, so for the next 2 days, for the shamatha, pick the object that you want to work with. The session after lunch, the compassion wing, we're going to engage in the Glen practice again, talk a little bit more about that. And then tomorrow evening, I want to finish off this chart, talk a little bit more about this chart tomorrow evening. So that's the topic for tomorrow evening. Any last questions before we go for the Shavasana?
When is the 10 days Vipassana?
10 days Vipassana.
next year.
Next year?
I don't know about next year, but I'm doing a brief 2-day thing next week called Guluk Mahamudra. This is a shamatha and Vipassana. For 10-day Vipassana, I don't know when that will be. Sometime in the future, I'm sure.
You're not sure. Impermanence.
Okay, let's finish with the Shavasana meditation.